Coming up on The World Today. Tong Yin Kit becomes the first person to be charged under Hong Kong's controversial national security law. US President Joe Biden announces US troops will withdraw from Iraq by the end of the year. Plus, at least one person is killed, 4 others still missing following an explosion at a chemical plant in Germany. Welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. We begin in Hong Kong, where we're witnessing the first, or perhaps more to come, in a landmark ruling. The first person to be charged under the Hong Kong controversial national security law has been found guilty. Tong Yin Kit was found guilty of inciting secession and terrorism after riding a motorbike into police officers and flying a flag calling for Hong Kong's liberation. More than 100 people have been arrested since the law came into force in 2019. Beijing insists that the widely criticized law, which came after a series of mass pro-democracy protests in 2019, is needed to bring stability to the city.
24-year-old Tong Yin Kit was found guilty of terrorism and inciting secession in the landmark case, which has long-term implications for how the legislation reshapes the city's common law traditions. He's the first to be charged under Hong Kong's national security law. An alternative charge of dangerous driving causing grievous bodily harm was not considered. Tong, a former waiter, is accused of carrying a flag with the protest slogan, "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times," and driving his motorbike into officers during a protest last July, shortly after the security law was enacted. The charges could lead to a prison term of several years to life. His sentencing will be announced at a later date. His trial tests the limits of free speech in Hong Kong, as prosecution and defense argue over the meaning of the slogan, widely used during the city's mass anti-government protests in 2019. Pro-democracy activists and human rights groups see Tong's case as a departure from Hong Kong's common law traditions, since he was denied bail and a jury trial.
At its broadest level, the national security law imposed on Hong Kong by the mainland authorities fundamentally undermines many of the rights that are still guaranteed to people in Hong Kong under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And by effectively putting forward this vague and overly broad law, the Hong Kong authorities now reserve to themselves the right essentially to prosecute any kind of speech that they or the authorities in Beijing don't like. Particularly, we are concerned about the establishment of national security courts, of national security police, and that these really undermine the ability of people to expect a fair trial, which has long been a real hallmark of the distinction between Hong Kong and Beijing.
The 3 judges at Tong's trial were picked by Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam to hear national security cases. Both Beijing and Hong Kong's government have repeatedly said the security law was necessary to bring stability back to the city, and assert that the rights and freedoms promised upon its return to Chinese rule in 1997 remain intact.
To bilateral relations, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says he's committed to having a constructive relationship with China and working on common challenges. He made the comments while laying out his vision for ties with Beijing, which have sunk to their lowest point in decades. The United States has put countering China at the heart of its national security policy for years, and President Joe Biden's administration has called rivalry with Beijing the biggest geopolitical test of this century.
That's my first question.
We will not flinch when our interests are threatened, yet we do not seek confrontation. So let me be clear. As Secretary, I am committed to pursuing a constructive, stable relationship with China, including stronger crisis communications with the People's Liberation Army. You know, big powers need to model transparency and communication. And so we hope that we can work together with Beijing on common challenges, especially the threat of climate change.
Meanwhile, months after he announced American troops withdrawal from Afghanistan, President Joe Biden says U.S. forces will end their combat mission in Iraq by the end of this year. However, they will continue to train and advise the Iraqi military. The announcement came after Mr. Biden held talks with Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi at the White House. There are currently 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq, helping local forces counter what remains of the Islamic State group. Numbers of U.S. troops are likely to stay the same, but the move is being seen as an attempt to help the Iraqi Prime Minister. The U.S. presence in Iraq has become a major issue since a top Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, and leader of an Iranian-backed Shia Muslim militia were killed in a U.S. drone strike in the capital, Baghdad, last year. Still in the United States, the House of Representatives Congressional Committee has begun its hearing investigating the January 6th Capitol attack, despite pushback from Republican lawmakers. Four Capitol police officers are being questioned by the committees today. Just a while ago, Sergeant Aquilo Gonell told the House Select Committee about the remarks made by former President Donald Trump before the insurrection. He says it is a pathetic excuse for his behavior for something that he himself helped to create, this monstrosity. I'm still recovering from those hugs and kisses that day that he claimed that so many rioters, terrorists were assaulting us that day. He said to me, it is insulting, it is demoralizing, because everything that we did was to prevent everyone at the Capitol from getting hurt. Other police officers recounted their experience with the riots, with reports of one having to remove the tip of his finger, another saying he was assaulted with his own gas mask by a Capitol rioter, and another recounting rioters calling him the N-word. Before the hearing, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy pushed his argument that the Congressional Committee formed to investigate the attack is a failed committee that will result in a failed report.
We now have a committee that all of America wants to know the answers to. Why were we ill-prepared for that day, and how can we make sure that it will never happen again? But unfortunately, Speaker Pelosi will only pick on people onto the committee that will ask the questions she wants asked. That becomes a failed committee and a failed report, a sham that no one can believe.
Let's get some light on this issue. So we've just mentioned Washington correspondent Maria Bird is on the line right now. Maria, a lot is expected to be revealed during this investigative hearing, just as we learned a lot in the one before. So how different is this from the one that was held months ago?
This hearing is really going to be looking at some of those very emotional testimonies, as we saw that happened earlier today. It's going to really be highlighting what many of the police officers saw and felt that were there on that January 6th day. It is going to focus again on really being able to identify, because we still have many individuals that have not yet been called to justice that were a part of this January 6th insurrection. And so this is a way to continue moving forward to really make it clear that that was unacceptable. Really for the Democrats to be sure that the Republicans are understanding their position on this, and to also bring some justice forward and to be able to put some policies and legislation in place to be able to address this and to look at this overall from the Capitol riots issue, because we have obviously heard that there are other potential riots that could potentially be pending in the coming weeks or months. So this is to ensure that all the appropriate measures are being made to ensure that Capitol and those legislators are secure.
You're right, Maria, because we do understand Trump supporters have something planned for August. But let's talk about President Biden's announcement on troop withdrawal from Iraq. He helped fulfill President Donald Trump's orders on Afghanistan. Now the U.S. troops are pulled out of the country, but you also have half the country being overrun by Taliban militants. Does the Biden administration consider the after effects of such moves, with Iraq now? And does the administration also still think that Afghanistan was a fait accompli despite the Taliban takeover?
Yes, obviously the Taliban has been, I think, one of the major areas, if you will say, a sore spot for the U.S. And so I think that what has happened now, and we're hearing the discussions around the Iraqi withdrawal of troops, 2,500 to be specific, but we also know that this is potentially going to be more of something that's going to be in writing. They probably will be moving many of these officers over to training advisors and to advisory roles rather than kind of being active on the ground and having troops present there. But we don't believe that there is going to be a full removal of any capacity of U.S. troops in the region.
And now the United States wants to work with China on climate change, on the Korean Peninsula, on Iran's nuclear program. So much rhetoric has gone on between both sides. Why the change in alliance?
Well, there's been issues around trade. Let's face it, we have some very serious times in the economy. The global economy is being impacted. And when you talk about two of the largest world economies having the type of odds that they've been at for quite some time now, it does not fare well for the rest of the world. And so we know that the U.S. believes and wants to continue conversations and potentially bring things. We just know that just very recently there were talks. And so we know that this trade information is going to be one of the high levels. And as you said, climate change and, there's a myriad of other discussions. But it's really based off of the fact that when you start having these conflicts with two of these very large nations and trade becomes at stake, you are potentially putting many others at risk beyond just Americans and Chinese.
Maria, thanks again for clearing these up for us, and do stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
Away from the United States, at least one person has been killed, 4 others still missing after an explosion at a chemical plant in Germany. Officials in the city of Leverkusen say 16 people were injured in the blast, which happened at 9:40 a.m. local time. The explosion triggered a fire that took several hours to put out. Plumes of black smoke were seen in the area. Police are told local residents to stay inside, close their windows and doors. The cause of the blast at the Champak waste incineration site is not yet known, but rescuers are still searching for the missing. Wildfires continue to burn in Greece, a forest area in a suburb of the capital, Athens. It was in flames earlier today. Eyewitness video shows plumes of smoke rising above Droshia in Athens, close to Stamata suburb, for which authorities issued a warning to residents. Temperatures were in the region of 36 degrees Celsius, according to local weather reports, and are due to rise as far as 39 later in the week. And in India, the chief of the weather department says climate change has led to extreme rainfall, causing deadly flooding across western Maharashtra and other parts of the country. Scientists have long said that climate change will lead to extreme weather conditions, resulting in heavier downpour and drought-like conditions in some areas. Environmentalists have also warned that climate change and indiscriminate construction in fragile coastal regions could lead to more disasters. You're still watching The World Today, still ahead. Welcome back to The World Today. Leaders around the world are still pushing for vaccinations, with the Delta variant ravaging countries and cases on the rise. The UK has already experienced 6 days of fall in the number of COVID cases, but the Prime Minister is calling for caution. Here's more from around the world.
The EU is on course to hit a target of fully vaccinating at least 70% of the adult population by the end of summer, given that percentage of those 18 and over have now received a first dose.
The European Union has kept its word and has delivered. Our target was to protect 70% of adults in the European Union with at least one dose of vaccination in July. Today we have achieved this target, and 57% of adults already have the full protection of double vaccination. So these figures put Europe among the world leaders.
Over in the UK, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it's important that people did not draw premature conclusions about several days of better COVID-19 case data and urges the public to remain cautious.
I've noticed that obviously that we're 6 days into some better figures, but it is very, very important that we don't allow ourselves to run away with premature conclusions about this. The step 4 of the opening up only took place a few days ago. People have got to remain very cautious, and that remains the approach of the government.
Away from Europe, the Japanese Prime Minister Yoshida Suga says the record in COVID-19 cases hit by Tokyo is not a problem for the Olympic Games, but residents should focus on working from home to suppress the movement of people. Tokyo reported 2,848 COVID-19 infections over the past 24 hours, the highest since the pandemic began, as media reported that authorities had asked hospitals to prepare more beds for patients as the Delta variant drives the surge. And finally, over in Thailand, Bangkok plans to create 240 beds for coronavirus patients with mild symptoms by turning train carriages into isolation center. It comes as daily reported cases in the capital continue to generally trend upwards, according to government data, placing a strain on medical facilities.
The Olympics is still very much on in Tokyo with surprises and record-breaking. U.S. gymnast Simone Biles' bid for a record 6 gold medals ended abruptly when she pulled out of a team event, leaving Russia's gymnastics team to carry the gold. The 4-time Olympic gold medalist said she blamed it on mental health issues, saying she had to focus on her mental health after pulling out of the women's gymnastics team final. The American left the arena after the vault, later returned to support her teammates as they claimed silver behind the Russian Olympic Committee. The 24-year-old scored 13.766, her lowest Olympic vault score, before withdrawing from the event. Meanwhile, Japanese superstar Naomi Osaka suffered a surprise exit in her home Olympics as a Czech. And from the Nigerian team, we understand Aruna Quadri, our own superstar table tennis player, lost to Gustavo Suboy of Brazil. Let's get the general update now from our sports editor, Austin Okunakpan in London, who has been keenly watching the Olympics. Austin, great to see you. What happened to Aruna?
Sporty greetings, Amarachi. That's the same question I was asking Aruna Quadri. I was speaking to him, and he says, look, it's sports, where anything can happen. In this world of sports, impossible is nothing. He gave everything, he had in that game. But the moment he lost the first game, 15-13, I knew it was going to be a very difficult one for him. He bounced back, won game 2 and 3, lost game 4. Won game 5 and lost game 6. So in table tennis, when it gets to the game of 6, then it's a very tough one. But Aruna Quadri struggled to explain what happened when I was speaking with him, and that's the same way I feel about it, because he's ranked better. He's ranked 20th in the world. So Gustavo of Brazil is ranked 36th in the world. Aruna Quadri definitely a better player to advance. But on this day, table tennis chose Suboy, and that's what it is.
Yeah, but so the rest of the delegation, what have been their performances? What's the general opinion?
Just as I said to you yesterday, Amarachi, I think it's same of the same. And the Olympic Games is giving us the same lessons over and over again for us to go back home, reflect, and understand that when you come to compete at this level, you're competing with the best of the best. So it's been tough. Aside the D Tigress, I struggled to write the D Tigress story today, the way they lost to America. But I'm super proud of those ladies and what they gave for the country. They fought so hard, won the first quarter and the fourth quarter, and then were able to cut the deficit of 20 points to just 9 against the best women's basketball team in the world, the United States of America. But they lost. Nonetheless, they can pick up lessons from there to go on to take on France and Germany. We also crashed out in badminton. Godwin Olofuad, Anu Okpeyori crashed out. And of course, in the singles for badminton, Dorcas Adeshokan also crashed out. But hey, guys, let's just for a minute think about this. These are sports that we don't really talk about in Nigeria. The Federation, they're now trying. Our athletes are qualifying for major events as the Olympics. It means we've got prospects. So when we come back home, Amarachi, as I said yesterday, I'm still saying the same thing. Let's give the charge to our administrators that we need to do more to keep these athletes going.
Indeed, we do. And I think the word, the phrase that will be remembered, not just in the Olympics, but sports this year, is mental health issues. And I think that's what Naomi Osaka attributed, her loss to. Eventually, Naomi Osaka, sorry, I meant Simone Biles attributed that to it. Naomi Osaka pulled out of a major competition this year.
Very, very serious. And we should not, joke with it. Aside what COVID-19 brought, a lot of persons deal with so much pressure when they get into a big competition as this. And Simone Biles explained it that, look, she couldn't handle the pressure. Naomi Osaka said the same thing, that it was about pressure. And you mentioned that coming to the Tokyo Olympics, Osaka was already dealing with that, pulling out of the French Open. She actually said she was bullied by the media. So she was hoping to use the Tokyo Olympics to forget that experience. And what a sad way to lose it, because she actually wanted to win gold for Japan, win it on home soil. She's the poster girl of the Olympics. When she lit the cauldron, I felt like Osaka felt a relief of everything that had happened to her prior to the Olympics. So it's just sad. I hope she picks herself back up. But it is what it is. Maketa was a better player on the day. I thought Naomi Osaka would have done much at least win one.
Yeah, Austin, we also have to keep wishing the Nigerian delegation the best. They're all stars, as far as I'm concerned. Everyone who made it to the Olympics, they're all stars. Thank you again for speaking with us, and keep the flag flying, though. Your support is very valuable to the team and to us here. Thanks again.
Thank you, Amarachi.
So as we end the program today, if you have a cat or you're a feline lover, do you know if your cat is looking a bit down in the dumps? Notoriously inscrutable cats aren't the best at letting you know when something is wrong. Well, I think that's all animals. But a new app powered by artificial intelligence claims it can decode the subtle facial cues of kitties to deliver a speedy assessment of their well-being. The app is called Tably, uses the feline grimace scale, pain assessment for cats based on ear position, orbital tightening or eye narrowing, muzzle tension, whiskers change, and head position. A study published in the peer-reviewed journal Scientific Reports in 2019 concluded that the FGS is a valid and reliable tool for acute pain assessment in cats. Wow. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.